Tonight, bullying in local schools continues to be a hot button issue, first of all across the country, but also right here in the Red River Valley. Our whistleblower hotline has received several complaints about bullying at Frazee High School. Valley News Team's Nishay Taylor explains how parents on both sides of the issue are asking the district to take action.
Some parents at Frazee High School say bullying is out of control.
My daughter has been directly affected by the bullying and harassment that's happening here.
During Monday's school board meeting, parents showed up looking for answers.
Discussed nothing? I said, when she brought up this about the ag room and they brought up the bullying, I said, you guys all sit up there.
But many parents say the district still isn't doing enough.
This has been going on for months. There should be some kind of discussion that at least we know you're listening.
Megan Rocio says the alleged bullying is causing a lasting effect on her daughter.
My daughter has such bad anxiety, she doesn't even want to come to school anymore.
Some parents have accused one student in particular for the bullying. But Curon White, the boy's father, says the accusations stem from a bigger issue.
The situation started this year, started with a fight involving my son. Was being called racial names.
And White says that his son did not report the allegations in fear that the district would not act on the matter. White adds that all of the claims against his son are false and that his son's name is being tarnished.
It's ruined. I mean, the kids at school look at him in a certain way. You know, he lost some of his friends. You know, we've had kids come in here and make threats towards him about.
The school district hired an investigator last month to look into all of the accusations. According to White, the report states that some of the acts his son is being accused of could not be proven. But ultimately, both parents are looking for the school district to just step up and act on all the bullying within the high school.
Address it with the students, address it with the faculty, address it with the community. Let them know that there is just not bullying on one level. There's bullying on all levels.
Do something, please.
In Frazee, Nishay Taylor, Valley News Live.
School leaders say the information shared by parents at the board meeting will be looked into and discussed during a work session.
Now, officials add that next work session has not yet been scheduled.